Kneel for me, for I am your master.
Well, hello there, P. Long time no see.
How did you get so far away? I've been chasing you for weeks.
Travelite, move fast, as they say. It seems the local authorities took offense at my bear hunting. Can you imagine that? A world where hunting monsters and beasts is against the law. I've traveled quite a bit south now. I think I lost them.
Yeah, well, your floppy house fell down completely, by the way. I've gathered your things in your nearly bottomless bag.
The Savage Pavilion is but a thing, and shall be a thing again whenever I rebuild it. Hopefully this time in a place with less bears. I'm glad you managed to gather my things. So many times in the past I've needed to rebuild from nothing. So how have you been, little one?
Well, back in the springtime I was pretty busy doing my Fae thing that I doubt you understand, but now that it's summer I can record another broadcast for you. But you were asking facetiously, weren't you? You don't really care what I've been up to.
That would be correct.
Well, anyway, I've been looking for you. Do you realize that your channel has been very quiet? You have many fans on the internet who want you to tell more stories for them.
I have fans? Do you mean the Savage Horde? I do not understand your internets.
Well, there are good people who watch your production and like your, wisdom. Oh, and there seems to be something wrong with the laptop.
Wrong? The technology has been working perfectly so far. Open it up and let me see.
What is going on? How did I get here?
Oh no, I've been hacked. Somebody put a virus on my beautiful laptop.
P, that isn't a malfunction. That's a visitor. Welcome, Sir Wolfie. He's the wolf god I mentioned in an earlier broadcast, who's temporarily trapped within the internet.
Oh, hey there, Thexsoar. I was trying to contact you, but I got stuck in your machine.
How did you get into my laptop? My magic mimics a router so that I can connect to the internet undetected. You shouldn't be able to be here.
I may be trapped for now, little Fae, but nothing stops me from traveling where I wish. Oh, by the way, there are some very interesting pictures in here.
Leave us alone. You don't have permission to look at those.
Permission? You are a silly little thing, aren't you?
Well, as you are here, Sir Wolfie, why don't you look over that story I sent P? You could help me spread wisdom to the Savage Horde alongside the fire here.
And don't look at any other files.
What, do you mean these pictures here? Looks like they're taken through a window just above the curtain rod. My, oh my. There are so many of them, too.
P, have you been invading people's privacy? I'm so proud of you.
Some of these are rather interesting. Well, I really doubt he chose his name by random. Maybe he should serve me.
His name? I thought it was just a strange fairy word.
Oh, Thexsoar. We have much to discuss.
You leave those alone. You can't just...
Wow. A tiny little ball gag for a tiny little Fae. How apt. I should invite you here more often, Sir Wolfie.
My form might be trapped within this technology, but my influence is far-reaching. Now, shall we begin? I believe this is about a ring.
Yes, it is a story from one of my travels, my very first encounter with a sentient item. A cautionary tale about using unknown magical items. When a magical ring that you use has its own idea of what it wants to do. A story of Nemo the Bard. I was living comfortably in the northern coastal town of Havenport, selling my skills with a sword in the summer and my stories alongside the tavern bards in the winter. When the spring thaw came, the mountain passes could be cleared, and the local magistrate always sent a caravan to the huge capital city of Centria to the south. The first caravan was always the most threatened, as dragons loved the cold weather and loved to strafe local caravans. Almost every year they would try and devour any caravan they saw, but if that caravan put up a strong enough fight, the dragons would back off and hibernate throughout the summer. So I was paid well to join the first caravan of spring and escort it safely to Centria. Yeah, it's caravan duty. Just about as boring a job as you can imagine. You'd think that, unless you'd been snowed into a little coastal village staring at the same dirty faces for 4 months. Trust me, I was ready to get out of town, and I heard that Centria was an amazing place. As I was tacking up my horse, the magistrate came up to me with a group of ladies behind her. It seemed that she had a slight detour in mind for me and wanted me to lead these ladies in checking out the catacombs under the ruins of Greenrock, an ancient city abandoned many generations ago when the dragon population became too intrusive. She had heard a rumor that some dragon cult had moved into the catacombs under the city, and she wanted us to go there and see if it was true, and if it was, to remove them, by any means necessary. There's always a dragon cult, isn't there? Seriously, stop idolizing dragons, people. They only want to eat you. They aren't doing your favors, they are literally playing with their food. They normally sent out some priests to maintain the catacombs every spring, and she wanted us to make sure that there wouldn't be any nasty surprises for them when they got there. Anyway, this detour meant more silver chits in my pocket to spend in Century after, and I liked the stipulation of any means necessary. It leaves me room to do what I need to do. I agreed. We set off along with the merchant caravan from Havenport south to Centuria, although our path would branch off between the great mountain ranges on our way to Greenrock. It turns out the dragons went into hibernation earlier this year, so it was very quiet, meaning boring. We soon left the caravan and traveled along the overgrown road and made camp up against some boulders on a hilltop above Greenrock to keep the chill wind away and finally get to know one another. So let me introduce you to our merry band of wanderers, stuck out here on the dead patrol. There was Trina the elf, the lithe little thing that knew the valley and path to the catacombs very well. She was a remarkably agile creature, but flighty and easily distracted by shiny things, and if you weren't careful, your silver chits might somehow end up in her pouch, conveniently forgotten, as to prove her innocent alibi. There was also Cassandra, the only other human in the party, hired to aid me in protection of the others. She was good with a sword and far better at the crossbow than I, but it was obvious that her mind was on bigger things than caravan duty and the annual tending to the catacombs. Let's see, there was another elf lady, Nozomi, her mumbling, and maybe she called it praying, I don't know, and I don't care. She was only along to re-sanctify the site if the rumors were true. She was dead weight, if you ask me. She neither helped in the hunt nor struck the campsite. Oh well, they claimed that she could heal, and that's always good, and the magistrate insisted that she come in the name of the church, so whatever. Who else? Oh, right. Adalia. How could I ever forget Adalia? Adalia was a gnome of a very kickable height, and a vacuum to anything valuable. I don't think that I have ever come across a creature who was more selfish or mean with money. I've never beaten her at cards, and woe be to anyone who dropped a chit near her or dare to pick it up. She took mishandled monies as donations to her personal well-being and took great offense at anyone who ever thought of robbing her of it. Seriously, if you drop a chit near her and dare to reach for it, you're just donating a finger to her. She was a foul little thing, but she was the only one in the party who had permission to know where the hidden traps were at the catacombs, and the only one who knew better than me what to look for in case someone else might have set their own. So all in all, a couple of warriors, a couple of rogues, and a priest all sat with their backs to the fire on a snowy, cold mountain night, arguing over who would take first watch. The others were very new to the whole adventuring thing, all but Cassandra. She and I stared out at the ruined city, and we both saw movement in the moonlight. We didn't even need to speak. We nodded to each other, and we knew that there was a fight ahead of us. I was right. Although it wasn't ahead, it happened to be above. Suddenly, Drina rolls away into the snow and gets to her feet with a dagger in each hand, startling us and our 4 horses. Before we could even get to our feet, a pair of dire wolves leapt over the boulders and on top of us. A little note about dire wolves to those who have never met one. Avoid them at all cost. What are they? Imagine a vicious wolf, only the size of an oxen or perhaps a small elephant. In this world, they were stark white, making them almost invisible up here in the snowy mountains. I admit I am a little jealous of their ability to sneak around so well, being such large bodies, but I'll gladly admire them from a distance. What happened next occurred before any of us could even get to our feet. A third, larger direwolf pounced from the darkness from the side, taking us all unaware as we were focused on the first one, and it landed fully upon poor Cassandra. Those huge jaws slammed down over her helmeted head, closing over most of her upper torso. Even through her chainmail and furs, I know I heard ribs snap like someone jumping on a pile of dry sticks. The direwolf shook her violently, bound to the other side of the fire with her in its mouth, nearly landing on Nozomi. Finally, we managed to get to our feet, and I spun my axe around and into the side of one of the hounds as Drina threw both her daggers into the large, fleeing direwolf. The second direwolf cleared the fire to land on the other side of me, opposite the one that I just buried my weapon into. I was in a very bad spot because the axe was stuck between the heaving, thick ribs, and I couldn't free it. A rookie mistake on my part, to say the least. My sword and shield were still bundled with my horse barding, too far away to get to. The direwolf that had just leapt behind me lowered down, ready to pounce upon me, but it suddenly yelped and whined and twitched strangely and spat up blood, before raising its head up and a short, curved blade pierced from inside the beast's throat. The blade split down as the direwolf twitched and fell dead to the side, and from the wide gash stepped a filthy, gory gnome.
No one jumps on a gnome!
That amazing little gnome had hidden in the snow and burrowed up into the direwolf's stomach and crawled out of its neck. Now that is pretty savage. The direwolf, with my axe still in it, suddenly ran after the larger one, and I grabbed a burning stick from the fire and ran after them. Sure, I was curious if Cassandra was alive and all, but more importantly, that beastie took my axe. Drina ran so far ahead of us with her cheating little trackless elf feet that I had to follow the blood in the snow to know where they went. The trail led to a root-shrouded cave, and the sight my exhausted eyes saw astonished me. Drina was sitting cross-legged on one of the thicker roots, carefully wiping herself free of blood with handfuls of wolf hair. Her demeanor was calm, almost regal, as she rubbed more snow upon her and wiped herself clean. I walked past her and into the cave to see 2 dead direwolves cooling in the night air, splayed open on top of the corpses of several other victims of the wolves. After retrieving my axe, I stepped back out, staring at Drina. She seemed distant as she meticulously preened. Also, she no longer had her bandolier of throwing knives, but a very fancy rapier belted to her skinny little hip. "Drina, are you all right?" She looked herself over, finally satisfied that her look was perfect, and raised an eyebrow at me.
I haven't been just all right since I was 8.
Something was very wrong. Was that elf just coy with me? I had not known Drina for long, but this strutting, confident woman walking her way back to the fire was not her. Then again, battle does do odd things to people. I've seen it. It is very likely that this was her first time in combat. I decided that the change was not a bad one, but I would have to keep an eye on her. Nazami and Idalia finally caught up with me and checked on the condition of poor Cassandra in that gore-laden cave. Well, I should say Nazami looked after our headless friend Cassandra, while Idalia went through the pouches of the corpses. If she found anything, she never said. When we finally all returned to the campfire, Nazami admitted that Cassandra was beyond her ability to heal. But if she took her body to Centria, immediately she could afford a resurrection. Well, now I had a dilemma. We were down one warrior, and we would be down our only healer if she took her into town. I also knew that by the motions in the dark, whoever was occupying those catacombs had seen our campfire and our fight. The longer that we waited before going in, the more defenses they would be able to erect. Cassandra had earned my respect and deserved the chance to come back and be the savage that I knew was within her. I owed her that chance. Now, I know what the more experienced of you out there are thinking right now, and you are totally correct. Rule number 1, never split the party. There is great wisdom in it. And I was about to admit that wisdom when Drina spoke up.
Tend to your charge, cleric. I alone, or perhaps with minor aid from this savage here, will be far more than a match for anything in those ruins.
She even saluted me with that rapier that she must have found in the cave. Now, I respect confidence, but the words that were coming out of that little elf, whose bicep I could touch fingers around, weren't hers. Where did all this bravado come from? I mean, sure, she managed to slay 2 direwolves on her own, but this is just creepy. Additionally, the way she held the blade was masterful. She took into account her strength in its heft. She turned it just so as to compensate perfectly. To my knowledge, Drina had never held a sword. She was a simple trapper's daughter, not a warrior. Idalia actually was the one who broke me from my judgment of Drina.
The skinny elf is right. If anyone is in that place, they heard those howls in combat. If we don't go in now, we may never get a chance and we'll never get paid. I won't be risking my life entering a ruin that I know someone has had time to prepare against me. We go now, or we go home.
So, I broke rule number 1. Don't judge me. Life does that on its own just fine. We bundled up as much of Cassandra as we could find and laid her across Nozomi's horse, and away they went into the night. With camp broke, Drina strode directly down the hill toward Green Rock. I kept her in sight, but fell back to walk alongside Idalia. I had to know if the change I saw in Drina was accurate, so I asked Idalia, who had known her for far longer. Tell me, Gnome, have you ever seen Drina act this way?
I was wondering if the air was too thin all the way up at your head to notice. I suppose one as limited as you would never figure this out otherwise, but she has a ring on her right index finger that was not there before combat.
I squinted, begrudgingly envying the gnome's ability to see clearly in the dark. Are you sure? Did you get a good look?
A good look? It is a banded mesh of star silver mounting concentric rings of polished onyx, ruby, and emerald, with intricate elfin etchings depicting celebration and song around the edge.
You noticed that much detail?
When it is of value, I notice. much like I did not notice you in that battle. Perhaps you were winded from all the labor it takes to keep such a waste of flesh standing so tall.
I bit back my immediate response, as I was expecting such an insult when speaking with Adalia. The quest comes first. Playing Punt the Gnome comes after.
Do not worry, Savage. I have a plan in motion already. You just keep that axe ready.
The three of us entered the ruined city under the broken entry arch without incident. The clouds were mostly parted, allowing excellent moonlight to bathe the old stone foundations in the ghostly light. Some still had timbers, but most were just piles of rubble. This made the travel through the overgrown streets easy to navigate to the city center, where most of the great church still stood. I stepped up and put a hand on Drina's thin shoulder to stop her, as she seemed ready to just walk right down there, and I'd rather Adalia went ahead first and do her craft. Drina looked disgusted at me, as if my contact with her had somehow defiled her. She tried to brush my hand away, but I was having none of it. I motioned for her to stay silent and waved for the irritating gnome to move ahead of us, as we all heard distant footsteps from down the long stone steps leading to the catacombs. We knew there would be trouble, so Adalia went down the steps. I readied my shield and stood back to back with Drina, while the gnome did her thing. I have had many experiences with traps and their disbarment, but Adalia the gnome had a real nose for it. She could not only find the ones that I could find, but she could find the ones protected by magic. My gift to see through illusion wasn't good enough this time. Adalia came back up the steps about 20 minutes later with a slightly less sour expression, which I took as her being satisfied with her work. The three of us egressed into the darkness below. I took a torch, being the only one who was unable to see in the dark. Down there it was your standard affair, long, straight hallways with long slits stacked 3 high on each side, most with corpses long dead. The entry room at the bottom of the stairs was well crafted in volcanic brick, smooth as glass and well mortared. There was a wash basin, cleverly combining a thin underground stream with a deep well under a silver basin connected to the heat of the mountain, providing a constant stream pouring into the silver basin of clean, hot water. I'm sure the clerics who once maintained this place enjoyed cleaning themselves up afterward. Drina, upon seeing it, immediately hopped over and began washing the grit of the travel off of her hands and arms like it was the most important thing to her. Adalia and I shared knowing glances. Noticing this sudden fetish in Drina to compulsively clean herself, we gave her a few minutes to properly clean herself. While she was doing that, Adalia and I examined a few of the ancient passageways branching away from the entryway. These were large square tunnels carved from the rock, and I noticed that one of the tunnels had an unusual mist forming at the end, and I swear I heard distant, dull drumming. After Adalia looked it over and determined that it was safe, the three of us carefully and silently moved through the mist. At the end of the passage, the wall had been knocked away, exposing a small, natural cavern, which had a large boiling pool of water in the middle of it. Around this pool were dozens of robed cultists, mumbling something that I'm sure they believed was draconic, as one of them beat time to a high drum and threw some kind of flashing powder into a lit brazier. Suspended above the pool, from the ceiling by a long, thin metal chain, was a very impressive pendant the size of my fist. It was obviously a large diamond, bound in gold and silver, with more precious gems lining the bands, probably worth a fortune. Adalia had clearly noticed this, and was planning her own invasion of the room, although considering her greed, I'm sure that she was prioritizing the upcoming battle quite differently than I slung my axe and drew my sword, a far better weapon in such close quarters. I sized up the cultists, seeing them as only a moderate threat, considering I was an excellent fighter and I'd already seen Drina manage to slice up 2 direwolves by herself. Whether it was the ring granting her mastery of that sword or not, together we should be able to do this. If we each attacked a side of the pool, we should be able to clear them out easy enough. I silently motioned my plan to Drina, She nodded in agreement. As expected, Adalia would have nothing to do with combat, as there was no profit in risking one's life when others can do it far better. I call her many horrible, deserving things, but she is no coward, simply being practical. A 2-foot-tall rogue was little use in a mob brawl like this. What I did not expect was to run directly into that roughly circular room alone. I readied my sword and shield and I slid down the slightly muddy embankment caused by the steam pool around so much grime and dirt, and Drina just froze. For all her bravado earlier, she didn't seem capable of purposefully stepping into so little mud. I was suddenly in combat that I could not back out of, and I was alone. Each of the cultists held a carved cudgel with a dragon head on it, probably some kind of holy item, and most of them were pretty damn good at swinging it around, but they wore no armor like I was. They landed 3 blows to my 1, but their blows bruised me while mine dropped them. Still, the numbers were badly against me. I called out to the others to come to my aid in some way, and I had already noticed the gnome deftly making her way into the caverns, but she obviously was taking advantage of the distraction to find a way to get that suspended treasure than helping me. Drina stood, poised at the steamy entrance to the room, ready for combat, but completely unwilling to step inside. To make things worse, because they always get worse, it seems the drum beater was a spellcaster. And alone I would never been able to weave my way through all these cultists to stop them from casting. Remember these lessons, my savages. There's a damn good reason for rule number 1. I needed a strong arm like Cassandra right now and a healer like Nazami later. But as per usual, I was going to have to make do and improvise. As I took a blow to the back of the head that knocked my helm into the water, I shouted, ordering Drina to get her skinny elven ass in here.
I am not Drina, you filthy savage. I am Nemo the Bard. My voice is the very definition of song. My stance is the incarnation of inspiration.
You know, killing a few of these guys would certainly inspire me more than you just standing up there in the steam. At least I finally realized by the change in her voice that what the problem had to be. She wasn't just being enchanted by the ring with bravado and swordcraft. No, she was being dominated by the ring into being somebody else entirely. This was my first time experiencing such a powerful item, and I had grossly underestimated just how bad my situation was. Idalia suddenly came up with a plan. She washed her hands in the hot water and turned to our dominated elven friend. She carefully hopped up to her, exuding something that I had never seen in the little gnome: excited admiration.
Nemo the Magnificent, the greatest bard of all time, the caster of powerful spells and singer of epic tales.
She knelt in front of Drina respectfully, extending her tiny hand. And Drina, or I suppose I should say Nemo, looked satisfied for being recognized and extended her hand to be kissed by the gnome. However, the gnome did more than that. She kissed the hand and slipped the ring right off her finger. Adalia's false, pleasant demeanor instantly shed away as she assessed the precious ring in her hand.
Good. I could do with some useful spells right now.
She polished the ring so it shined and slid it onto her index and middle finger, as it was far too large for her. Drina stood there, confused, for several long moments as her former identity took back over. She dropped the heavy sword, suddenly very confused. None of this was really helping me, of course, as I hacked my way further into the ring of cultists. Adalia reached toward the suspended treasure as a hand of light extended from hers and grabbed onto it. She obviously only wanted the shiny treasure, not to aid me. The spellcasting cultist threw up some other type of magic that batted the glowing hand away.
You dare use my magic? Do you not realize who I am?
I have absolutely no idea who you are, other than someone who doesn't realize that you cannot dominate a gnome. You were infused to a magic ring, you foolish bard. I am bred of it.
Idalia then used the bard's gift and sang out a mesmerizing note that resonated throughout the small room. I shook off the dizziness to realize that most of the cultists were confused and staggering about. I took full advantage of the situation and did me some serious killing in the next few seconds. Drina had finally come to her senses and run into the room to help me, picking up 2 of the carved wooden clubs. Finally, some help. Now here is where a bunch of things happened all at once, and is an excellent example of the need to stay focused in combat and work together as a party. Drina reached the muddy edge of the hot spring, knocking 2 of the cultists into it, while the cultist spellcaster suddenly summoned a mighty crackling lightning bolt directly towards her, while I sunk my axe into the spellcaster's forehead, fouling their aim, while Adalia sprinted into the room and deftly ran up Drina's back, launching herself at the suspended treasure, which took the brunt of the lightning spell that I had foully aimed. The thin chain vaporized, dropping the greedy gnome into the middle of the boiling pool. But none of us really noticed if she hit or not, as we were all blind and deaf from some fool casting a lightning bolt in such a small place. I recovered from the thunderous ringing in my ears and used my tactical savvy to blind fight the remaining stunned cultists. I could already tell that the muddy ceiling was beginning to shift. Obviously, this natural room was not going to last long after such a powerful spell had been let loose. I managed to find Drina and get her into the exit as large amounts of dirt and stone started pouring in from the weakened ceiling. The 2 of us scrambled back into the stone hallway of the catacomb only just before the entire room behind us collapsed. We lay there, partially buried in the muck, with garb pulled over our faces so that we could breathe. Eventually, our senses returned and we pulled ourselves to our feet. The natural cavern was gone, completely collapsed. Even if Adalia had survived the boiling water, there was no way that she survived the cave-in. Her greed had led to her death, and the ring of Nemo was once again buried. Good riddance to them both. As we cleaned ourselves in the entry room, I caught poor Drina up on what had just happened, as it seemed she had no knowledge of the effects of the ring. She only remembered tracking the direwolves to their den and seeing a recent corpse of somebody in flashy clothes under the roots. She remembered a flash of light and a shiny ring, and then suddenly she was standing in front of an opening in an underground hot spring. The ring had dominated her, took up the old sword and avenged his own death before I had even managed to get to the den and the direwolves. In time, I made it to Centria with Drina and found that Cassandra had in fact been resuscitated. We were all paid, the catacombs were safe for the clerics to do their thing. The world was short one very irritating gnome. All in all, a successful quest. Magic items are amazing things, my savages, but never take them for granted. You might come upon one someday that takes you instead. Speaking of enchanted items, Sir Wolfie, you and I need to have a talk about my little fey friend over there with the ball gag. I'm very interested in just what a paparazzi is. So remember, my friends, be wary of unknown magical trinkets. Never split the party. Do not let greed take you to a place that you cannot dig yourself out of. And stay savage.